Last year, the United States Congress passed the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. Proponents of the bill said it was supposed to reduce inflation, but it's not clear whether it actually did that or not when it became law. What is clear that it did do was massively change the US laws regarding electric vehicle tax credits. So watch this video to find out all about it and all the new details about which cars qualify and which cars don't qualify for the electric vehicle tax credit. First off, let's talk about who qualifies for the EV tax credit. If you're making over $150,000 a year, you do not qualify if you're a single filer. Now, if you made less than $150,000 the year before you buy your EV, but you make $150,000 the year you buy your EV, that's still okay. Under the rules, you could still qualify for the tax credit and you could apply to receive it. Now, there's also obviously different rules for married couples and heads of households, and that's listed here, as you can see. Now let's look at what vehicles qualify for the EV tax credit, or what's actually called the clean vehicle tax credit. So some plug-in hybrids actually qualify for the tax credit as well if they meet all the rest of the requirements, but as far as for the battery, they have at least 7 kilowatt hours of capacity. So even if it still takes in some gas, but it meets the rest of the requirements and it has a battery capacity of at least 7 kilowatt hours, it can meet the requirements to get the tax credit. And actually the entire list of qualified manufacturers and vehicles is available and provided by the I.R.S. What's important to note here though, the list is still in progress. A lot of manufacturers and vehicles are still being worked out by the I.R.S. and their rules as to whether they will actually qualify or not. So more to come on this topic. We'll definitely make videos on this in the future, but keep in mind that the list still is in progress, but some of the top name EVs are already settled on the list. For example, Tesla, Rivian, a bunch of EV companies already have their cars on the list. So we could look at that in a minute. But what's important to note here is that you have to have a gross vehicle weight less than 14,000 pounds. Now, almost any EV anyone would want for personal use would weigh less than 14,000 pounds. Now, a fun fact here about the undergoing final assembly in North America requirement, this actually caused a lot of companies based out of foreign countries to have a lot of problems with this new law because their final assembly lines are not in North America in a lot of instances. But a lot of companies' final assembly lines are in North America, either in the United States, Canada, or Mexico. And a lot of companies who are currently based in foreign nations, such as VinFast, which has recently gotten into the EV market, they're actually planning on bringing their manufacturing to North America. So VinFast will definitely qualify for the EV tax credit if, of course, they meet all the requirements, which they almost certainly will. So the other requirements are having to do with the battery assembly, and that's actually not listed here, but it's actually in the details of the law. And the battery assembly has some requirements too about where it's manufactured and some rules about whether the US has a trade agreement with the countries where the assembly is based out of. So it's actually a little complicated, but the I.R.S. tried to make it a little more simple by putting out the list, but of course the list is incomplete as of now. And we'll look at that list in a second. So what's also key about the new law is that used cars can now qualify for the tax credit. Before 2023, used electric vehicles would not qualify for an EV tax credit or a clean vehicle tax credit, whatever you want to call it. But now, under the new rules, used cars will qualify as long as the seller reports the information at the time of the sale to the I.R.S. So a lot of new things have happened with this new law. Now let's look at the manufacturers and models that are qualified for the EV tax credit. So if we look here at the list from the I.R.S., we can see that a lot of companies here have this sort of line. This manufacturer has entered into a written agreement with us to become a qualified manufacturer, but hasn't yet submitted a list of specific makes and models that are eligible. Please check back here for updated information. This is what I was referring to earlier with the list still being in progress. So companies like Mercedes, let's see, what else? I believe Kia, Kia is still in the same limbo mode. And BMW though does have these two models here that are qualified as long as their MSRP is under these thresholds. So now let's look at some of the big names. If we look at Tesla just recently at the start of this year announced massive price cuts for a lot of its vehicles to help it qualify for the tax credit, which in turn would make them on a net level cheaper for the consumer. And when they're cheaper for the consumer, that drives them to Tesla, and Tesla's sales go up this way. So Tesla has all these models here that do qualify if they meet the MSRP limit. So Tesla is doing its best to meet the EV tax credit requirements. And if we look at Rivian, for example, Rivian, under certain builds that you will qualify for Rivian. And if we look at, for example, Toyota, of course, does not have a well-distributed pure EV yet. And if we look at Volkswagen has these ID4s that qualify if they're under the MSRP limit. And you just got to make sure that your MSRP limit is met if you're looking at these list cars and if you're looking at your actual purchase price of a vehicle. So let's look at General Motors, for example, of course, which includes GMC, Chevy, Buick, Cadillac, and so far these are what are on the list. The Cadillac Lyriq does qualify. Cadillac Lyriq is a very nice car. You can check out our video on Cadillac Lyriq. And also, I forgot to mention earlier, we're about to take delivery of a Rivian R1T, so make sure to stay tuned for that video, and you'll see all the details of our delivery process too in that video. So let's take a look at what else is important to note. Yeah, a bunch of these vehicles do not qualify yet. Audi has the Q5 TFCI Quattro that qualifies. So the IRS doesn't release big statements whenever it adds something to the list, or if it removes something for the list. But if you stay tuned to our channel, we will keep you posted whenever a change does happen. So please like this video if you liked it. If you have a comment, leave a comment. And please remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the notification bell to get notified whenever we release a video. One thing I should also mention, guys, is that some states in the United States have their own electric vehicle tax credit programs that you could get in addition to the federal tax credit. So make sure to check your own state's rules to see if you qualify for certain tax credits based on your criteria. So make sure you check and see if you could save some money.